I should have known Kevin was planning something when he insisted on driving me to Westfield Shopping Center himself. He never offered to drive me anywhere, especially not on a Saturday afternoon when the Blazers were playing. But there I was, watching his beat-up Honda disappear into the swirling snow, while I stood in the parking lot with nothing but my purse and the bitter December wind cutting through my coat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The snow had started that morning as gentle flakes, the kind that makes Portland look like a Christmas card. By noon, it had transformed into something more serious, blanketing the city in a thick white silence that made even the busiest intersections feel muffled and strange. Kevin had been unusually attentive all week, asking about my shopping plans, whether I needed anything from the mall, if I had enough cash on me. I thought he was being considerate. I should have known better. Kevin and I had been married for 3 years, and in that time, I had learned to read the subtle shifts in his behavior like weather patterns. There was the way he drummed his fingers against his coffee mug when he was plotting something. The way he would suddenly become overly helpful right before he needed a favor. The way he would smile just a little too wide when he thought he was being clever. All those signs had been there that morning, but I had been too distracted by my own thoughts to notice. You see, Kevin thought he knew everything about me. He thought I was the unemployed wife who spent her days watching daytime television and organizing closets. He thought I was financially dependent on his modest salary from Henderson Insurance Agency. He thought I needed him for everything, from rides to the grocery store to permission to spend money on anything more expensive than discount mascara. What Kevin didn't know was that I had been building something in the shadows, something that would change everything between us. But that morning, as I sat in the passenger seat of his Honda, watching the snow begin to accumulate on the windshield wipers, I played the part he expected. I thanked him for the ride. I promised to call when I was ready to be picked up. I even let him lecture me about not spending too much money, nodding along as he reminded me that his Christmas bonus hadn't come through yet, and we needed to be careful. The Westfield Shopping Center was packed despite the weather. Families rushed between stores with arms full of packages, teenagers clustered around the food court, and the sound of Christmas carols mixed with the general chaos of holiday shopping. I had told Kevin I needed to pick up a few last-minute gifts, which wasn't entirely a lie. I did have shopping to do, but not the kind he imagined. I made my way through the crowds, past the department stores and chain restaurants, toward the upper level where the higher-end boutiques were located. That's where I was supposed to meet Lisa Chen, my business partner, and the only person who knew the truth about what I had been building over the past 18 months. Lisa was already waiting for me outside Nordstrom, her arms crossed and her expression concerned. She was one of those people who looked effortlessly put together even in casual clothes, the kind of woman who could make jeans and a sweater look like they belonged in a magazine. We had met 2 years ago at a networking event that Kevin had reluctantly allowed me to attend, and from the moment we started talking, I knew she understood something about ambition that my husband never would. "Amanda," she said, pulling me into a quick hug, "I was starting to worry you wouldn't make it. The roads are getting bad out there." I glanced toward the large windows that faced the parking lot. The snow was falling harder now, and I could see people hurrying toward their cars with their heads down against the wind. Kevin dropped me off. He's supposed to pick me up later. Lisa raised an eyebrow. She had met Kevin exactly once, at a barbecue last summer, and had formed her opinion of him within the first 10 minutes. She never said anything directly, but I could tell from the way she changed the subject whenever I mentioned him that she didn't think much of my husband's character. "Well," she said, "let's hope the weather doesn't get any worse. Are you ready for this?" I nodded, though my stomach was tight with nerves. We were meeting with Helena Morrison, the owner of Morrison Events, one of Portland's most prestigious event planning companies. Helena was looking to expand her business, and had been considering a partnership with smaller firms that specialized in luxury markets. Lisa had arranged the meeting through her connections, and if everything went well, Elegant Affairs, the company I had been secretly building, would become Morrison Events' exclusive partner for high-end weddings and corporate functions. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the Grand Hotel downtown, but Helena had called that morning to suggest we meet at the mall instead. She was already there shopping with her daughter and thought it would be more convenient. What she didn't know was that by changing the location, she was about to save my marriage and my sanity in ways I never could have imagined. We found Helena at a small cafe on the second level, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from years of success. She was exactly what I had expected, poised, direct, and completely unimpressed by small talk. Within minutes, she was asking pointed questions about my business model, my client base, and my vision for growth. For the next hour, I felt more like myself than I had in months. This was the part of my life that Kevin knew nothing about, the part where I was smart and capable and building something meaningful. Elegant Affairs had started as a side project, something to keep me busy while Kevin was at work. I had used my savings from before our marriage to fund it, working with clients who paid in cash and never asked questions about invoices or business addresses. In 18 months, I had planned 12 weddings, 8 corporate events, and 6 private parties. My clients were wealthy, discreet, and completely satisfied with my work. They recommended me to their friends, who recommended me to their friends, and slowly but surely, I was building a reputation in Portland's luxury market. The money I made went into a separate account that Kevin didn't know existed, and the work I did happened during hours when he thought I was running errands or meeting friends for coffee. Helena listened to my presentation with the kind of attention that made me feel like every word mattered. She asked about my vendor relationships, my pricing structure, and my capacity for handling larger events. When I showed her photos from recent weddings I had planned, she studied them with the eye of someone who understood quality and attention to detail. "Impressive," she said finally, closing the portfolio I had prepared. "Your aesthetic is exactly what we're looking for. Sophisticated but not stuffy, elegant but approachable." Lisa smiled, and I felt a surge of pride that was immediately followed by anxiety. This was really happening. After months of careful planning and secret meetings, I was on the verge of turning my hidden business into something legitimate and profitable. "There would be some conditions," Helena continued. "We would need you to be available for events on weekends and evenings. Some of our clients require very hands-on coordination, and availability is crucial." I nodded, though I knew this would be the most challenging part. Kevin expected me to be home in the evenings and available on weekends. He had never explicitly forbidden me from working, but he had made it clear that he considered my primary job to be taking care of our home and being available when he needed me. "I understand," I said. "That won't be a problem." Helena studied me for a moment, and I had the feeling she could see more than I was saying. "Good. I'd like to start with a trial period. 3 months, 5 events. If everything goes well, we can discuss a more permanent arrangement." We shook hands, and as Helena gathered her things to leave, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Everything I had been working toward was finally within reach, but taking that step would mean changing everything about my life with Kevin. After Helena left, Lisa and I sat in the cafe for another few minutes, going over the details of what had just happened. The snow outside was falling even harder now, and the parking lot was starting to look like a white ocean dotted with the dark shapes of cars. "You realize this changes everything," Lisa said quietly. I nodded. "I know." "Are you going to tell Kevin?" That was the question I had been avoiding for weeks. Kevin's reaction to my success would tell me everything I needed to know about our marriage. If he was proud of me, if he supported my ambition, then maybe we could find a way to make this work. But if he felt threatened, if he tried to make me choose between my business and our relationship, Then I would have to decide what mattered more. I don't know, I said honestly. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe, eventually. Lisa looked like she wanted to say more, but her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and frowned. My sister just said the highways are getting bad. I should probably head home before it gets worse. I checked my own phone, expecting to see a message from Kevin about the pickup time, but there was nothing. I scrolled through my contacts and called him. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. That's weird, I said to Lisa. He's not answering. Maybe he's driving, she suggested, but she looked concerned. I tried calling again with the same result. Then I sent a text message asking when he would be coming to get me. The message delivered, but there was no immediate response. Lisa offered to drive me home, but I declined. Kevin had specifically said he would pick me up, and I didn't want to create an issue by leaving with someone else. We said goodbye, and I watched her disappear into the crowd of shoppers heading for the exits. That's when I decided to actually do some shopping while I waited. I had told Kevin I was going to the mall to buy gifts, so I might as well make it true. I wandered through a few stores, picking up small items for my sister and Kevin's mother. But my mind kept drifting back to the meeting with Helena and what it would mean for my future. An hour passed, then another. I tried calling Kevin again, but the phone went straight to voicemail this time. My text messages were being delivered but not read. The mall was starting to empty out as people hurried home ahead of the storm, and I was beginning to feel genuinely worried. By 4 o'clock, the snow was coming down so hard that I could barely see the parking lot through the windows. The mall announcement system was advising shoppers to drive carefully and consider staying, put until conditions improved. I found a bench near the main entrance and called Kevin one more time. This time, he answered. "Kevin?" I said, relief flooding through me. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours." There was a pause, and then he said, "Oh. Hey, Amanda, what's up?" The casual tone of his voice stopped me cold. "What's up?" "Kevin, you were supposed to pick me up. I'm stranded at the mall and it's snowing really hard." Another pause. "Right, the mall. Listen. Something came up." Something came up? I could hear voices in the background, laughter, the sound of a television. "Kevin, where are you?" "I'm at my mom's house with Tyler. We decided to watch the game, and then the snow started getting bad, so we figured it was safer to just stay put." I stared out at the parking lot, where the snow was now so deep that some of the smaller cars were almost completely buried. "Kevin, you left me here in a snowstorm." "Come on, Amanda, don't be dramatic. It's just snow. You can call an Uber or something." The dismissive tone in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't an oversight or a miscommunication. This was deliberate. He had dropped me off at the mall with no intention of coming back for me, knowing that a storm was coming, knowing that I would be stranded. "Kevin," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "there are no Ubers running in this weather. The roads are dangerous, and the mall is practically empty." "Then wait it out," he said. "The storm will pass eventually." In the background, I heard his mother's voice. "Is that Amanda? Tell her to stop being such a princess. A little snow never hurt anyone." That's when I understood. This wasn't just Kevin being thoughtless or irresponsible. This was a message, a demonstration of how little I mattered in his life. He was at his mother's house, warm and comfortable, watching the game with his brother, while I sat alone in a mall during a snowstorm. And his mother, who had never liked me, was probably loving every minute of it. "You know what, Kevin?" I said, standing up from the bench. "You're absolutely right. I'll figure it out." "See? I knew you'd be reasonable about it." I hung up, without saying goodbye, and stood there for a moment, letting the full weight of what had just happened settle over me. My husband had abandoned me. He had left me stranded in a snowstorm because watching a basketball game with his family was more important than my safety, and he expected me to be reasonable about it. But here's what Kevin didn't know about his reasonable, dependent wife. I had options. I had resources. And I had been preparing for a moment like this without even realizing it. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. James Rodriguez, the driver I had hired for Helena Morrison's most important clients. James worked for an exclusive transportation service that catered to Portland's wealthiest residents, and over the past few months, I had used his services several times for business meetings that required a certain level of discretion and professionalism. James answered on the second ring. "Ms. Parker? Is everything all right?" "James," I said, "I need a favor. Are you working today?" "I'm always working, ma'am. What can I do for you?" I explained the situation briefly, leaving out the part about Kevin abandoning me but mentioning that I was stranded at the mall. James listened without judgment, and when I finished, he said, "I can be there in 20 minutes. The Rolls handles. Well in snow. And I know the roads." "Thank you," I said, and for the first time all day I felt like I could breathe again. As I waited for James, I thought about what Kevin would say when he eventually came home and found me there, warm and safe as if nothing had happened. He would probably expect me to be grateful that I had managed to get home on my own. He would never think to ask how I had afforded a ride in weather like this, or where I had found a driver willing to venture out in a storm. But that was Kevin's mistake. He had never bothered to learn who I really was beneath the surface he chose to see. And now, as I watched the headlights of a silver Rolls-Royce Phantom cut through the swirling snow in the parking lot, I realized that his ignorance was about to become his downfall. The silver Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through the parking lot like a ship cutting through white waves, its headlights creating perfect cones of light in the swirling snow. Even from inside the mall, I could see the vehicle's elegant silhouette as it navigated between the abandoned cars and snowdrifts with an almost supernatural grace. James had kept his word, arriving exactly 20 minutes after our phone call, despite road conditions that had sent most sensible people home hours ago. I gathered my shopping bags and made my way toward the main entrance, my heels clicking against the polished floor with a confidence I hadn't felt when Kevin dropped me off that morning. The few remaining shoppers and store employees who were still in the mall turned to watch as the luxury vehicle came to a stop directly in front of the entrance. Through the tall glass doors, I could see James stepping out of the driver's seat, immaculate in his black suit and tie despite the weather. James Rodriguez was the kind of man who made expensive cars look even more expensive simply by being associated with them. He had worked for Portland's elite families for over 15 years, driving CEOs to board meetings, socialites to charity galas, and celebrities to private events. His discretion was legendary, his professionalism unquestionable, and his ability to handle any situation with calm efficiency had made him one of the most sought-after private drivers in the city. But more than that, James had become something of a confidant during our business relationship. When I needed to arrive at client meetings looking like the successful businesswoman I was becoming, rather than the financially dependent housewife Kevin believed me to be, James was the one who made that transformation possible. He never asked questions about why I paid for his services in cash or why I always had him drop me off a few blocks from my house. He simply provided the service with the kind of quiet dignity that made me feel like the professional I was working to become. As I pushed through the mall's heavy glass doors, the cold air hit me like a physical force. But James was already there with an umbrella, shielding me from the worst of the wind and snow. The gesture was so perfectly executed, so naturally professional, that anyone watching would have assumed I was exactly the kind of person who always traveled this way. "Ms. Parker," he said with a slight nod, "I apologize for the weather. I trust your shopping was successful?" "Very successful, thank you," I replied, allowing him to escort me to the passenger door. The interior of the Rolls-Royce was warm and quiet, the kind of sanctuary that money could buy but that most people never experienced. As James closed the door behind me and walked around to the driver's seat, I sank into the leather upholstery and felt something shift inside me. This was who I really was. Not the woman who had stood in the mall for hours, calling a husband who couldn't be bothered to answer his phone. Not the wife who had been abandoned in a snowstorm because a basketball game was more important than her safety. I was Amanda Parker, owner of Elegant Affairs, future partner of Morrison Events, and a woman who had just closed a deal that would change her life. James pulled away from the mall with the same smooth precision he had used to arrive, and as we joined the sparse traffic on the snow-covered roads, I felt my phone buzz with a text message. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see something from Kevin, but instead it was from Lisa. "Just got home safely. How did you get out of there?" "Roads are terrible." I smiled and typed back, "Private car. Long story. We'll call you tomorrow." The response came immediately. "Private car? Amanda, you're full of surprises." She had no idea. As we drove through the quiet streets of Portland, I thought about all the surprises I had been keeping, all the pieces of my real life that I had hidden away to preserve the peace in my marriage. But sitting in the back of that Rolls-Royce, watching the city pass by through windows that separated me from the storm outside, I realized that maybe peace wasn't worth the price I had been paying for it. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was Kevin. "Hey, the game's over and the snow is letting up a little. I'll probably head over to get you in an hour or so." I stared at the message for a long moment. An hour or so. As if I had been sitting in that mall all day just waiting for his convenience. As if my time, my comfort, my safety were all secondary considerations to whatever he felt like doing. I typed back, "Don't worry about it. I'm already home." The response was immediate. "What? How?" I didn't answer. Let him wonder. Let him try to figure out how his dependent, helpless wife had managed to get herself home from a shopping mall during a snowstorm. Let him puzzle over the implications of a woman who didn't need him as much as he thought she did. James caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right, Miss Parker?" "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. We pulled into my neighborhood 20 minutes later, the suburban streets looking like something out of a winter postcard. The houses were mostly dark, their residents settling in for the evening with hot chocolate and television. But our house stood out with every light blazing. Kevin's Honda was in the driveway, covered with snow, which meant he had left his mother's house and rushed home as soon as he received my text. "Would you like me to wait?" James asked as he pulled up to the curb. I considered it for a moment. The smart thing would be to have him leave immediately, to go inside and pretend that I had somehow managed to catch a ride with a friend or neighbor. But sitting in that car, surrounded by the tangible proof of my success and independence, I realized I was tired of being smart in the way that protected other people's feelings. "Yes," I said. "Please wait. I have a feeling this won't take long." James nodded and settled back in his seat with the patient professionalism of someone who had waited outside countless houses during countless family dramas. I gathered my shopping bags and stepped out into the snow, my heels finding purchase on the icy walkway with more confidence than I felt. The front door opened before I reached it, and Kevin appeared in the doorway wearing sweatpants and a Blazers jersey, his hair still damp from a recent shower. His eyes went immediately to the Rolls-Royce idling at the curb, its elegant lines visible even through the falling snow. "Amanda?" he said, his voice uncertain. "Whose car is that?" I walked past him into the house, setting my bags down in the entryway before turning to face him. "My ride home." Kevin's eyes darted between me and the car outside, his confusion evident in every line of his face. "Your ride?" "Amanda, that's a Rolls-Royce. Who do you know who drives a Rolls-Royce?" "Apparently, I know more people than you think I do." He closed the front door but kept glancing toward the window where the car's headlights created a warm glow in the falling snow. "I don't understand." How did you even call someone? And why is he just sitting out there? He's waiting to make... Sure, I'm safe, I said, hanging up my coat with deliberate calm. It's called professional service. You might not be familiar with the concept. The barb hit its mark, and Kevin's face flushed. Look, I'm sorry about this afternoon. Things just got complicated, and with the weather and everything. Complicated, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Kevin ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of buying time when he knew he was in the wrong but didn't want to admit it. Come on, Amanda. It wasn't that. Big a deal. You figured it out, right? You got home fine. No thanks to you. I said I was sorry. What more do you want? That was Kevin in a nutshell. He thought an apology was a magic word that could erase any mistake, any thoughtlessness, any deliberate cruelty. He had never understood that some actions revealed character in ways that couldn't be undone with a simple sorry. Through the window, I could see James still waiting patiently in the Rolls-Royce, and suddenly I realized that Kevin's surprise at my resources wasn't just confusion, it was fear. He was starting to understand that there were parts of my life he knew nothing about, parts that suggested I might not need him as much as he had always assumed. Kevin, I said, do you know what I did today? Before you abandoned me at the mall? His face went pale. I didn't abandon you. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? I closed a business deal, I continued, ignoring his deflection. A partnership that's going to change everything about my life. Kevin blinked, clearly, trying to process this information. A business deal? What business? Amanda, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the event planning company I've been building for the past 18 months. I'm talking about the clients I've been working with, the money I've been making, and the future I've been planning that doesn't depend on your permission or your approval. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language, his mouth opening and closing without producing any sound. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the Rolls-Royce continued. To wait. That's impossible, he said finally. You don't have a business. You don't have clients. You're home all day, Amanda. I would know if you were working. I smiled, the same smile I had given Helena Morrison when she asked about my availability for weekend events. Would you? Because it seems like there's a lot you don't know about me. Kevin's confusion was shifting into something else now. Anger, maybe, or wounded pride. The man who had left me stranded in a snowstorm was apparently offended by the discovery that his wife had a life he knew nothing about. This is crazy, he said. Even if you have some kind of side business, which I seriously doubt, there's no way you're making enough money to afford. He gestured toward the window where the Rolls-Royce sat like a statement of everything he didn't understand about me. To afford what, Kevin? To afford professional transportation? To afford dignity? To afford not depending on a husband who thinks a basketball game is more important than his wife's safety? It wasn't about the game, he said quickly, but the lie was obvious even to him. No? Then what was it about? Kevin's jaw worked silently for a moment, and I could see him struggling to find an explanation that didn't make him look as selfish and thoughtless as he actually was. My mom said you needed to learn to be more independent. She said you rely on me too much for everything, and maybe if you had to figure things out on your own once in a while. Your mother, I said softly. Of course. Margaret Parker had never liked me, and the feeling was mutual. From the moment Kevin introduced us, she had made it clear that she thought her son could do better. I wasn't successful enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't good enough for her precious boy. The irony was almost too perfect to bear. So this was a lesson, I said. You and your mother decided that I needed to learn independence, and your teaching method was to abandon me in a shopping mall during a snowstorm. When you put it like that, it sounds worse than it was. Kevin, it sounds exactly as bad as it was. Through the window, I saw James step out of the car and check his watch. He was being discreet, but I knew he was concerned about the weather and the late hour. Professional drivers didn't wait indefinitely, even for good clients. I should let him go, I said, more to myself than to Kevin. Yeah, Kevin said, relief evident in his voice. That's probably a good idea. I mean, it must be costing a fortune to have him just sitting out there. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in our 3-year marriage. He wasn't concerned about the cost because he cared about my financial well-being. He was concerned because he couldn't understand how I could afford it, and that lack of understanding threatened his perception of our relationship and his role in it. You're right, I said. I should handle this. I walked to the front door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch despite the cold. James rolled down the driver's window as I approached the car. Thank you for waiting, I said. I think we're good here. Of course, Miss Parker. Shall I put this on your regular account? The question was routine, the kind of thing James asked all his clients, but I knew Kevin was listening from the doorway. I could feel his attention like a weight between my shoulder blades. Yes, that's fine. And James? I'll probably need your services more frequently in the coming weeks. I'll call your office tomorrow to discuss scheduling. Very good, ma'am. Have a pleasant evening. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb with the same elegant silence it had arrived with, its taillights disappearing into the swirling snow like something from a dream. I stood on the porch for a moment longer, letting the cold air clear, my head before I turned to face Kevin. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, part confusion, part suspicion, and part something that might have been respect. Regular account? He said. That's right. Amanda, how long has this been going on? I walked past him into the house, hanging up my coat and picking up my shopping bags as if this were any other evening after any other day. Longer than you think. Not as long as it's going to. What's that supposed to mean? I turned to face him, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was looking at him from a position of strength rather than dependence. It means that things are going to change, Kevin, starting now. The conversation that followed would determine everything about our future together. I could see Kevin trying to process the revelation that his wife, the woman he thought he knew completely, had been living a double life for 18 months. He was struggling with the implications of my independence, my success, and my apparent access to resources he had never suspected. But more than that, he was beginning to understand that the balance of power in our relationship had shifted. The woman he had left at the mall that morning was not the same woman who had come home in a Rolls-Royce. And the man who had thought he was teaching his wife a lesson about dependence was about to learn one about consequences. As we stood in our living room, with the snow falling outside and the warmth of the house contrasting sharply with the cold reality of what had happened between us, I realized that Kevin had given me something valuable that afternoon, even if he hadn't meant to. He had shown me exactly who he was and exactly what our marriage meant to him. And in doing so, he had freed me to show him exactly who I was and exactly what I was capable of. The game had changed, and Kevin was just beginning to understand that he had never really known the rules. But I did. I had been learning them for 18 months, building my strength and resources in secret, preparing for a moment like this without even realizing it. And now, as my husband stared at me with dawning comprehension, I was ready to play the game by my own rules for the first time in our marriage. What Kevin didn't yet understand was that abandoning me at the mall hadn't been a lesson in independence. It had been the catalyst for my liberation. And the woman standing in front of him now, the woman who had arrived home in a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, was not going to go back to being the dependent wife he thought he could manipulate and control. The real conversation was just beginning. And for the first time in 3 years, I was going to be the one setting the terms. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp winter sunlight that made everything look deceptively peaceful. The snow had stopped falling sometime during the night, leaving Portland blanketed in pristine white that would have been beautiful if it hadn't reminded me of everything that had happened the day before. Kevin had slept on the couch, claiming he didn't want to wake me up after our late conversation, but I knew the real reason. He was afraid to share a bed with the stranger his wife had apparently become overnight. I found him in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and staring out the window at our snow-covered backyard, with the hollow expression of someone who had spent the night trying to make sense of his suddenly unfamiliar world. His hair was disheveled, his clothes wrinkled from sleeping in them, and there was something almost pitiful about the way he looked up when I entered the room. "Morning," he said cautiously, as if he wasn't sure what version of me he would be dealing with today. "Good morning," I replied, moving past him to start the coffee maker. The routine was familiar, domestic, and completely at odds with the tension that filled the space between us like fog. Kevin watched me measure coffee grounds and add water with the kind of attention people usually reserved for diffusing bombs. "Amanda," he said finally, "about yesterday. About everything. I think we need to talk." I turned to face him, leaning against the counter with my arms crossed. "I think we talked plenty last night." "No, I mean really talk. About this business of yours, about the money, about where we go from here." "Where we go from here." The phrase hung in the air between us, loaded with implications that neither of us was quite ready to address directly. Kevin was beginning to understand that our marriage had reached a crossroads, but he still thought he could navigate us back to familiar territory if he just said the right things. "What do you want to know?" I asked. He set down his coffee cup and ran both hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of buying time when he was nervous. "Everything, I guess. How long have you been planning events? How much money are you making? And why didn't you tell me?" The questions were reasonable, but the tone was wrong. Kevin wasn't asking out of genuine curiosity or pride in my accomplishments. He was asking because he needed to assess the threat to his perception of our relationship and figure out how to regain control of a situation that had clearly slipped beyond his understanding. "I've been building elegant affairs for 18 months, I said. "I started small, planning birthday parties and anniversary celebrations for friends of friends. Word spread, and I began getting referrals for larger events, weddings, corporate functions, charity galas, the kind of work that requires discretion and attention to detail." Kevin nodded as if he understood, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. "And the money?" "I charge appropriately for my services. Luxury event. Planning isn't cheap, Kevin. My clients expect excellence and they're willing to pay for it." "How much?" he pressed. The directness of the question caught me off guard, not because I was ashamed of my success, but because it revealed so much about Kevin's priorities. He wasn't interested in the work itself, the creativity involved, or the satisfaction I derived from building something meaningful. He wanted to know how much money I was making, because that number would determine how he felt about my independence. "Enough," I said simply. Kevin's jaw tightened. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now." The coffee maker finished brewing with a soft beep, and I poured myself a cup, taking my time with the cream and sugar, while Kevin struggled with my refusal to quantify my success in terms he could understand. I could see him trying to calculate, to estimate, to make sense of numbers that would help him categorize this new version of his wife. "Amanda," he said, finally, "I need to understand what we're dealing with here. Are we talking about a few $100s a month? A few thousand? Because if you're making serious money, that changes things." "Changes things how?" "Well, for one thing, it means you've been hiding income from me. We're married, Amanda. We're supposed to be a team. We're supposed to make financial decisions together." There it was. The real issue wasn't that I had built a successful business without his knowledge. The real issue was that I had done it without his permission, without his oversight, without acknowledging his authority over my choices and my money. A team, I repeated. Is that what we are? Of course that's what we are. Teams don't abandon each other in shopping malls during snowstorms. Kevin flinched as if I had struck him. I told you that was a mistake. I was trying to help you become more independent. By leaving me stranded? By prioritizing a basketball game over my safety? By listening to your mother's advice about how to manage your wife? Don't bring my mother into this. Your mother is already in this, Kevin. She's been in our marriage from the beginning, offering opinions about my shortcomings and suggestions for how you can fix me. Yesterday was just the latest example. Kevin stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the kitchen floor. That's not fair. My mother cares about both of us. Your mother cares about controlling both of us. There's a difference. The accusation hung between us like a challenge, and I could see Kevin weighing his response. He could defend his mother and confirm everything I had just said about divided loyalties, or he could defend our marriage and acknowledge that his family's interference had become a problem. The fact that he hesitated told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced at the screen to see a notification from Lisa. Helena Morrison wants to meet with us again today. Her office, 2 p.m. This is big, Amanda. I typed back quickly, I'll be there. Kevin noticed my attention shift to the phone. Work? He asked, and there was something bitter in his tone. Yes. On a Sunday? Success doesn't follow a 9-to-5 schedule, Kevin. He stared at me for a moment, and I could see him struggling with the implications of what I had just said. The woman he had married worked when he was at the office and was available when he came home. She didn't have clients who contacted her on weekends or business meetings that took precedence over domestic routines. So what happens now? He asked. You just continue running this secret business? Making money I don't know about? Lying to me about where you go and what you do? The word lying stung because it wasn't entirely unfair. I had been deceptive about my activities, though not about anything that should have mattered in a healthy marriage. But Kevin's reaction confirmed what I had suspected all along. He wasn't upset about the deception itself. He was upset about losing control. I haven't lied to you, I said carefully. I've simply lived a part of my life that you never bothered to ask about. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Lying would be telling you I was at the grocery store when I was actually at a client meeting. What I did was build a career, during the hours when you assumed I was doing nothing productive. You never asked what I did with my time, Kevin. You never showed any interest in my thoughts, my goals, or my ambitions. You just assumed I was content to exist in the narrow space you created for me. Kevin's face was flushed now, and I could see anger replacing confusion in his expression. That's not true. I care about your interests. Name one. What? Name one interest of mine that doesn't directly relate to you or our household. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Kevin opened his mouth several times as if to speak, then closed it again. Finally, he said, You like cooking? I cook for you. That's not the same as enjoying cooking. You like shopping. I shop for things we need. Again, not the same thing. Kevin sat back down heavily, the fight going out of him as he realized that he couldn't answer my simple question. In 3 years of marriage, he had never bothered to learn who I was beyond my function in his life. This isn't fair, he said quietly. You're changing the rules in the middle of the game. I'm not changing anything, Kevin. I'm just refusing to pretend anymore that we were playing the same game to begin with. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something about the timing made me answer. Amanda Parker. Ms. Parker, this is Catherine Walsh from Pacific Northwest Magazine. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Pacific Northwest Magazine was the region's premier lifestyle publication, the kind of magazine that featured the city's most exclusive events and successful entrepreneurs. I had seen Elegant Affairs mentioned in their pages when we had planned events for their advertisers, but I had never spoken directly with their editorial staff. "Not at all," I said, stepping into the living room for privacy. "How can I help you?" "We're working on a feature about Portland's rising female entrepreneurs, and your name came up several times during our research. Helena Morrison spoke very highly of your work, and we'd love to include you in the article." I felt my pulse quicken. This was the kind of recognition that could transform Elegant Affairs from a successful local business into something much larger. I'd be honored to participate. "Wonderful. We're hoping to schedule interviews this week, and our photographer would like to capture some images of you in your work environment. Could we arrange something for Tuesday or Wednesday?" "Tuesday would be perfect." "Excellent. I'll have my assistant contact you with the details. And Ms. Parker, congratulations on your success. We're looking forward to sharing your story." I hung up and stood in the living room for a moment, processing what had just happened. A magazine feature would bring visibility that I had never imagined possible. It would attract new clients, establish my reputation beyond Portland's social circles, and mark my transition from secret entrepreneur to legitimate businesswoman. But it would also make it impossible to continue hiding my success from Kevin. I walked back into the kitchen to find him exactly where I had left him, staring into his coffee cup with the expression of someone contemplating the ruins of his assumptions. "That was Pacific Northwest Magazine," I said. "They want to feature me in an article about female entrepreneurs." Kevin looked up slowly. "What kind of feature?" "The kind that comes with interviews and photo shoots? The kind that announces to the entire city that Amanda Parker owns a successful business?" The implications hit him immediately. Whatever privacy we had maintained around our marital problems would disappear the moment my face appeared in a glossy magazine alongside a description of my business success. His friends would know, his coworkers would know, his mother would know. "You're going to do it," he said. It wasn't a question. "Of course I'm going to do it. Even though it will change everything." "Kevin, everything has already changed. Yesterday, when you left me at that mall, you showed me exactly what you think of me and exactly what our marriage means to you. I can't unknow that. I can't go back to pretending that we're a team when you've made it clear that I'm just a dependent you can abandon when it's convenient." Kevin stood up again, this time with the kind of desperate energy that comes from realizing you're losing something you took for granted. "Amanda, listen to me. I made a mistake yesterday. A big mistake. I was being selfish and thoughtless, and I'm sorry. But that doesn't mean we can't fix this." "How?" "We can work together. I can help you with your business. I can be supportive, involved. We can be real partners." The offer might have been touching if it hadn't come 18 months too late. Kevin wasn't interested in being my partner when I was struggling to build something from nothing. He was interested now that I had proven my success and attracted attention from prestigious magazines. "Where were you when I was planning my first event?" I asked. "When I was staying up late researching vendors and creating proposals? When I was nervous about my first big client meeting? Where was this partnership when I actually needed support?" Kevin's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. He couldn't answer because we both knew where he had been, assuming I was watching television or organizing closets, never considering that I might be building something meaningful. "I didn't know," he said finally. "You never told me. I never told you because you never created space for me to tell you. You never asked about my dreams or my ambitions. You never treated me like someone who might have something important to say." The truth of what I was saying was written all over Kevin's face. He was beginning to understand that our marriage had failed long before yesterday's abandonment at the mall. The snowstorm had just made the failure impossible to ignore. "So what happens now?" he asked again, but this time the question carried the weight of real fear. Now we figure out whether there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. And if there isn't? I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw not the confident man I had married, but someone who was finally confronting the consequences of years of thoughtless selfishness. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part of me felt relieved that we were finally having an honest conversation about the state of our relationship. "Then we'll deal with that too," I said. Kevin nodded slowly, and I could see him trying to process a future that looked nothing like the one he had imagined when he woke up that morning. The woman he thought he controlled was successful and independent. The marriage he thought was stable was hanging by a thread, and the comfortable life he had built on the foundation of my dependence was crumbling beneath his feet. But for me, standing in our kitchen with sunlight streaming through the windows and the promise of new opportunities ahead, the future had never looked brighter. I had spent 18 months building something beautiful in secret, and now I was finally ready to let the world see what I had accomplished. The magazine feature would be just the beginning. Helena Morrison's partnership would open doors I had never imagined. And Kevin's abandonment at the mall, intended as a lesson in dependence, had instead taught me the most valuable lesson of all. I didn't need him nearly as much as he needed me to need him. As I finished my coffee and prepared to get ready for my meeting with Helena, I realized that Kevin had given me an unexpected gift. By showing me exactly who he was and exactly what he thought of me, he had freed me to become exactly who I was meant to be. And for that, despite everything, I would always be grateful. The meeting with Helena Morrison that afternoon transformed everything I thought I knew about my own potential. Her office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Portland's snow-covered skyline. The space itself was a masterclass in understated luxury, the kind of environment where million-dollar deals were discussed over artisanal coffee and handcrafted pastries. Helena was waiting for us when Lisa and I arrived, but she wasn't alone. Seated around the polished conference table were 3 other women I recognized from Portland's business community. Sarah Chen, who owned the city's most exclusive catering company; Rebecca Martinez, whose floral designs had graced the pages of Architectural Digest; and Diana Foster, a renowned photographer whose work commanded 5-figure fees for wedding albums alone. "Amanda," Helena said, rising to greet us with the kind of smile that suggested this meeting was about much more than a simple partnership. "I'm so glad you could make it on short notice. I'd like you to meet some colleagues who are very interested in what you've been building." As introductions were made and we settled around the table, I began to understand that this wasn't just a follow-up to our conversation at the mall. This was an evaluation, a chance for Portland's elite event professionals to assess whether Amanda Parker and Elegant Affairs were worthy of joining their exclusive circle. Sarah Chen spoke first, her voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from years of success in a demanding industry. "Helena shared some photos from the Williamson wedding you planned last month. The attention to detail was extraordinary, especially the way you integrated the vintage elements with the modern floral arrangements." I felt a flush of pride at the recognition. The Williamson wedding had been one of my most challenging projects, a celebration for a tech executive's daughter that required blending the family's traditional values with the bride's contemporary aesthetic. I had spent weeks sourcing antique linens and coordinating with local artisans to create custom centerpieces that honored both visions. "Thank you," I said. The bride had very specific ideas about honoring her grandmother's memory while still creating something that felt authentically her own. It was about finding the balance between reverence and innovation. Rebecca Martinez leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in this industry. Too many planners either copy what they've seen before or chase trends without understanding the emotional foundation of what they're creating." Diana Foster nodded in agreement. "I've been photographing weddings for 15 years, and I can Always tell when an event has been planned by someone who understands storytelling versus someone who's just following a checklist. Your work tells stories. The conversation continued for the next hour, covering everything from vendor relationships to client management to the creative process behind luxury event design. What struck me most was how naturally I fit into this group of accomplished women, how my experiences and insights seemed to complement rather than compete with their expertise. It was Helena who finally addressed the elephant in the room. Amanda, we've been discussing the possibility of creating a collaborative partnership, something more extensive than the trial arrangement we discussed yesterday. Lisa caught my eye across the table, and I could see her excitement barely contained behind her professional demeanor. We had hoped for a simple vendor relationship with Morrison Events, but this sounded like something much larger. What kind of collaboration? I asked. Sarah answered first. We've been talking about forming an alliance of sorts, a group of independent businesses that work together on high-end events, exclusive partnerships that allow us to offer clients a comprehensive luxury experience. Think of it as a consortium, Rebecca added. Each of us brings our specialty, but we collaborate on marketing, share resources, and refer clients to each other exclusively. Diana leaned back in her chair, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. And we share the financial benefits, premium pricing, exclusive clientele, and the kind of reputation that allows us to be selective about the projects we take on. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about growing elegant affairs. This was about becoming part of Portland's luxury event ecosystem at the highest level, the kind of opportunity that could transform my secret side business into a major player in the industry. What would this mean practically? I asked, though my heart was already racing with possibilities. Helena opened a leather portfolio and extracted a set of documents. We've prepared a preliminary agreement outlining the terms, exclusive partnerships, shared marketing costs, coordinated pricing structures, and a commitment to maintaining the highest standards of service. She slid the documents across the table to me. The financial projections are conservative, but based on our current client bases and the synergies we could create, we're looking at gross revenues that would make each of our businesses significantly more profitable. I scanned the numbers on the first page and felt my breath catch. The projected income for Elegant Affairs under this arrangement was more than Kevin made in 2 years at the insurance agency. This wasn't just financial independence. This was financial security at a level I had never imagined possible. There is one consideration, Helena continued, her voice taking on a slightly more serious tone. This level of partnership requires a significant time commitment. We're talking about events that might require weekend travel, evening consultations, and availability during traditional holiday periods. Sarah nodded. Our clients expect us to be accessible when they need us. A bride planning a destination wedding in Napa doesn't care that it's Christmas Eve if she has a floral emergency. The work is demanding, Rebecca added, but the rewards are proportional. We're not competing for budget brides or corporate lunch meetings. We're creating experiences that people remember for the rest of their lives. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture of support that reminded me I wasn't alone in this decision. But as I looked around the table at these successful, confident women, I realized that the choice wasn't really about the business opportunity. It was about finally admitting who I really was and what I really wanted from my life. I need to review these documents with my attorney, I said finally, but I'm very interested in moving forward. Helena's smile was immediate and genuine. Excellent. Take all the time you need for due diligence, but I hope you'll consider joining us. What you've built with Elegant Affairs in 18 months is impressive, Amanda. What we could build together could be extraordinary. As the meeting concluded and contact information was exchanged, I felt like I was floating somewhere outside my own body. The woman who had been abandoned at a shopping mall just 24 hours earlier was now being courted by Portland's most successful event professionals. The wife who had hidden her business from her husband was being offered a partnership that would make concealment impossible. Lisa and I walked to the parking garage in relative silence, both of us processing the magnitude of what had just happened. When we reached her car, she finally spoke. "Amanda, do you understand what just happened in there?" I laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls around us. "I think I'm still trying to process it. That wasn't just a business meeting. That was an initiation. Helena Morrison doesn't invite people into her inner circle lightly. Sarah Chen has a waiting list of caterers who would kill for her recommendation. Rebecca Martinez turns down more work than most people ever get offered. And Diana Foster," I added, "charges more for a wedding album than most people spend on their entire celebration." Lisa nodded emphatically. "Exactly, and they want you as a partner, not as a subcontractor or a vendor, but as an equal." The weight of that realization settled over me as we drove through downtown Portland, the snow-covered streets passing by like a movie playing outside the car windows. Equal. It was a word I hadn't associated with myself in years, not since I had married Kevin and gradually allowed my sense of personal identity to merge with my role as his wife. "There's something else," Lisa said as we stopped at a red light. "Helena mentioned that Pacific Northwest magazine contacted her for a reference before they called you. This magazine feature isn't just about highlighting successful women. It's about establishing you as one of the city's premier event planners." I turned to look at her, understanding the implication immediately. Which means this partnership announcement would be perfectly timed to coincide with the article. Exactly. Maximum visibility, maximum impact. By the time that magazine hits the stands, you won't just be Amanda Parker, successful entrepreneur. You'll be Amanda Parker, founding member of Portland's most exclusive event planning consortium. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. There would be no going back from this level of public success, no pretending that elegant affairs was just a hobby or a side project, no maintaining the fiction that I was financially dependent on Kevin's modest insurance salary. My phone rang as we pulled into my driveway, and Kevin's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering, knowing that the conversation we were about to have would change everything between us. "Hi," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Amanda, where are you? I've been calling for hours." I glanced at my phone and saw 3 missed calls. "I was in a meeting. I told you I had a business appointment this afternoon." "Right, the business meeting." There was something strained in Kevin's voice, a tension that suggested he had spent the afternoon trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the revelations of the past 24 hours. "How did it go?" "Very well," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Better than I expected, actually." "Good. That's good. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning, and I have some ideas about how we can move forward together." Lisa caught my eye and mouthed the words, "Good luck," before getting out of her car and walking to her own vehicle. I watched her drive away before responding to Kevin. "What kind of ideas?" "I could help you with the business side of things. Marketing, financial planning, client development. I have experience with business operations from the insurance agency." The offer was so tone-deaf, so fundamentally misguided, that I almost laughed out loud. Kevin wanted to help me develop a business that was already more successful than he could imagine, using skills from an industry that bore no resemblance to luxury event planning. "Kevin," I said carefully, "I appreciate the offer, but I have the business side handled. Come on, Amanda. You've been doing this as a hobby for a year and a half. If you're going to make it into a real business, you need professional guidance. A hobby." After everything that had happened, after the magazine feature and the partnership offer and the recognition from industry leaders, Kevin still saw my work as a hobby that needed his masculine guidance to become legitimate. "I'll see you when I get inside," I said, ending the call before he could respond. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering my thoughts and steeling myself for the conversation that was waiting beyond our front door. Through the living room windows, I could see Kevin pacing back and forth, his phone still in his hand. He was agitated, probably frustrated by my abrupt end to our call. But that was his problem to solve. When I finally walked into the house, Kevin was waiting for me in the entryway, his expression a mixture of concern and determination that I recognized as his fixing problems face. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "I agree. I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I think I understand what's really going on here." I set down my purse and hung up my coat, taking my time with each gesture while Kevin watched me with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complicated puzzle. "And what's going on, Kevin?" "You're having some kind of midlife crisis. You're feeling unfulfilled, maybe a little bored, and you've created this fantasy business to make yourself feel important." The words hit me like a slap, not because they hurt, but because they revealed just how little Kevin understood about me, about my work, and about the reality of our situation. "A fantasy business," I repeated. "Look, I'm not trying to diminish what you've accomplished. Planning parties is great, and I'm sure your friends appreciate the help with their events. But if we're going to move forward as a marriage, we need to be realistic about what this is and what it isn't." I stared at my husband, this man I had lived with for 3 years, and realized that he was incapable of seeing me as anything other than the limited version of myself that fit comfortably within his worldview. To Kevin, I would always be the dependent wife playing at business, rather than the successful entrepreneur I had actually become. "Kevin," I said slowly, "what would you say if I told you that my fantasy business just received an offer to partner with Helena Morrison?" His brow furrowed in confusion. "Who's Helena Morrison?" "She owns Morrison Events, one of the most prestigious event planning companies in the Pacific Northwest." "Okay," he said, clearly not understanding the significance. "What would you say if I told you that this partnership could generate more income for my business than you make at the insurance agency?" Kevin's expression shifted from confusion to skepticism. "I'd say you're exaggerating." I walked to my purse and extracted the partnership documents Helena had given me, setting them on the coffee table where Kevin could see the letterhead and legal formatting that marked them as serious business proposals rather than casual agreements. "What would you say if I told you that Pacific Northwest magazine is featuring me in an article about successful female entrepreneurs?" "Amanda, this is getting ridiculous." "And what would you say if I told you that everything I just described is true, and the only fantasy in this house is your belief that you married someone who needs your permission to be successful?" Kevin picked up the partnership documents, his eyes scanning the first page with growing bewilderment. I could see him trying to process the legal language, the financial projections, and the implications of what he was reading. "This can't be real," he said finally. "It's completely real." "But you don't know anything about business contracts. You don't have a lawyer or an accountant. You can't just sign something like this." "You're right," I said. "Which is why I have a consultation scheduled with Morrison Events' corporate attorney tomorrow morning and a meeting with their recommended accountant tomorrow afternoon." The document slipped from Kevin's hands as he stared at me with the expression of someone watching their entire understanding of reality crumble in real time. "Who are you?" he whispered. It was the first honest question he had asked me in years, and for the first time since I had walked through our front door, I smiled. "I'm exactly who I've always been, Kevin. You just never bothered to look." The silence that followed my declaration stretched between us like a chasm, filled with 3 years of unspoken truths and willful blindness. Kevin stood in our living room holding legal documents that proved everything he thought he knew about me was wrong, while I watched the careful construction of his reality collapse in slow motion. For the first time in our marriage, there was nowhere left to hide behind polite fiction or comfortable assumptions. Kevin set the partnership agreement down on the coffee table with the kind of deliberate care people use when handling explosives. His hands were trembling slightly, and I could see him struggling to process information that fundamentally contradicted his understanding of who we were as a couple. "How much money are we talking about?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I had been expecting this question since he first learned about my business, but hearing him ask it confirmed everything I had suspected about his priorities. Not, "How long have you been unhappy?" or "What can I do to support your dreams?" but, "How much money?" "Enough to change everything," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters right now." Kevin ran both hands through his hair, a gesture that had once seemed endearing but now struck me as childish. "Amanda, I need numbers. I need to understand what we're dealing with. Are we talking about enough money to pay off the mortgage? Enough to quit my job? Enough to retire early?" "We aren't dealing with anything, Kevin. I am dealing with my business, my opportunities, and my future." The distinction hit him like a physical blow. "Your future? What about our future? What about our marriage?" It was the question I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The question that would force us both to confront the fundamental incompatibility that had been growing between us since the day we said our vows. "What marriage?" I asked quietly. "The one where you make unilateral decisions about my safety and well-being. The one where you listen to your mother's advice about how to manage your wife. The one where you abandon me in a snowstorm because teaching me independence is more important than treating me with basic human decency?" I said I was sorry about that. Being sorry doesn't undo the revelation, Kevin. It doesn't change what that moment showed me about who you really are and what you really think of me. Kevin began pacing the length of our living room, his agitation growing with each step. "So this is it? You're successful now, so you're just going to throw away 3 years of marriage?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally admitting that there wasn't as much here as I pretended there was." The honesty of that statement seemed to stop Kevin mid-stride. He turned to face me with an expression that was equal parts hurt and anger. "That's not true. We've built a life together. We have a home, shared friends, shared memories. We have a house that you bought and I maintain. We have your friends who tolerate me and my friends who wonder why I settled. And we have memories of a relationship where I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared entirely. That's not how I remember it." "That's because you weren't paying attention." My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced down to see a notification from Helena Morrison. "Reviewed your initial client portfolio with the team. Unanimous. Agreement that you're exactly what we've been looking for. Let's discuss terms tomorrow." The timing was perfect, a reminder of the opportunities waiting for me beyond this conversation and this marriage. I showed Kevin the message, watching his face as he read the words that confirmed everything I had been trying to tell him. "Helena Morrison wants to discuss terms," he read aloud. "What kind of terms?" "The kind that will make Elegant Affairs one of Portland's premier event planning companies. The kind that will put me in the same league as the city's most successful entrepreneurs. The kind that will change my life completely." Kevin stared at the phone screen for a long moment, then looked up at me with something approaching panic in his eyes. "And you're just going to do it? You're going to make this huge life change without even discussing it with me?" "I'm discussing it with you now." "No, you're informing me. There's a difference." He was right, but the irony of his complaint was almost overwhelming. "Kevin, when did you discuss leaving me at the mall with me? When did you discuss spending Sunday afternoon at your mother's house instead of picking up your wife? When did you discuss any of the dozens of decisions you've made over the years that affected my life?" "That's different." "How?" Because those were small things, day-to-day decisions. This is huge. This affects our entire future. My entire future, I corrected. This affects my entire future. Your future is whatever you decide to make it. The distinction seemed to finally penetrate Kevin's consciousness, and I watched as the full implications of what I was saying became clear to him. I wasn't just talking about taking on a business partner or expanding my client base. I was talking about fundamentally restructuring my life in ways that might not include him. "You're leaving me," he said, and there was something almost childlike in the way he said it. "I'm leaving the version of myself that I became when I married you," I replied. "Whether you're part of who I become next is up to you." Kevin sat down heavily on the couch, the partnership documents spread out beside him like evidence of a crime he couldn't quite comprehend. "I don't understand how this happened. How did we get here?" It was the first question he had asked that suggested genuine confusion rather than wounded pride, and I found myself softening slightly. "We got here because I stopped being honest about who I was and what I wanted, and you stopped being curious about the woman you married. But I love you." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt a familiar ache in my chest. Not because I doubted Kevin's sincerity, but because I finally understood that his love was for someone who had never really existed. He loved the idea of me, the convenient fiction of a wife who was content to exist in the margins of his life. "I know you do," I said gently. "But you love someone who isn't real. You love the woman who needed you for everything, who had no ambitions beyond making your life comfortable, who would never challenge your authority or your assumptions. That woman was a performance, Kevin. I played her so well that I almost convinced myself she was real." "So who are you, really?" It was the second honest question he had asked, and I realized that for all the pain this conversation was causing both of us, it was also the most authentic exchange we had ever had. "I'm someone who builds things. I'm someone who sees beauty in details that other people miss. I'm someone who can coordinate 20 vendors and 200 guests and make it look effortless. I'm someone who can negotiate with billionaires and make them feel like they're getting exactly what they dreamed of." I paused, looking around our living room with its neutral colors and safe choices. "I'm someone who has been suffocating in this house and this marriage for 3 years. Kevin flinched as if I had struck him. "I never asked you to suffocate. You never asked me to breathe either." My phone rang, interrupting the moment, and I saw Catherine Walsh's name on the screen. The magazine interview that would announce my success to the entire city. "I need to take this," I said to Kevin, then answered the call. "Catherine, thank you for calling back." "Ms. Parker, I hope I'm not interrupting your evening, but I wanted to confirm some details for tomorrow's interview. Our photographer would like to capture some images of you in your natural work environment. Would your office be suitable for that?" I glanced at Kevin, who was watching me with the expression of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. "Actually, I think we can do better than that. I'm finalizing a partnership with Helena Morrison and Morrison Events. Could we arrange to do the photos at her offices downtown?" "Helena Morrison?" Catherine's excitement was audible. "That would be perfect. The Morrison offices would provide exactly the kind of sophisticated backdrop we're looking for. Should I coordinate directly with her assistant?" "I'll handle the coordination and confirm the details with you first thing in the morning." "Wonderful. And Ms. Parker, this partnership sounds like it will add another compelling dimension to your story. Our readers love features about women who are not just successful individually, but who are reshaping entire industries through collaboration." I ended the call and found Kevin staring at me with something approaching awe. "You're really doing this," he said. "You're really going to be in a magazine as a successful businesswoman." "Yes. And everyone will know. Everyone will see that you're not just my wife, but someone important in your own right." "Yes." Kevin was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him trying to envision a world where people knew him as Amanda Parker's husband rather than the other way around. The reversal seemed to disturb him more than anything else we had discussed. "I don't know if I can handle that," he said finally. "Handle what?" "Being married to someone more successful than me. Being known as the guy whose wife has the real career while he sells insurance. Having people wonder what someone like you is doing with someone like me." The admission was raw and honest, and it revealed the insecurity that had been driving Kevin's need to control our relationship from the beginning. He hadn't been trying to protect me or teach me independence. He had been trying to keep me small enough that his own limitations wouldn't be so obvious by comparison. "Kevin," I said, sitting down across from him, "success isn't a competition. My achievements don't diminish yours. Don't they? What happens when your business is making 10 times what I make at the insurance agency? What happens when you're traveling to exclusive resorts and meeting with millionaires while I'm processing claims for fender benders? What happens is that we figure out how to support each other's goals instead of competing with them. And if we can't figure that out?" The question hung between us like a sword, sharp and unavoidable. I looked at my husband, this man I had tried so hard to love in the way he wanted to be loved, and realized that we had finally arrived at the moment of truth. Then we admit that we want different things, and we're different people, and we stop trying to force a relationship that doesn't work. Kevin's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like a lost child rather than a grown man. "I don't want to lose you." "You're not losing me, Kevin. You never really had me. You had a version of me that I created to make our relationship work, but that version was killing me slowly." "So, what happens now?" I looked around our living room, with its careful decorations and safe choices, and realized that I could already envision the space without me in it. Kevin would be fine. He would find someone who genuinely wanted the kind of quiet, controlled life he offered. Someone who would appreciate his stability without feeling trapped by his limitations. Now we both get to find out who we really are when we're not trying to be what the other person needs. Kevin nodded slowly, and I could see acceptance beginning to replace denial in his expression. "The business partnership, the magazine article, all of it, you're really going to do it. I'm really going to do it. And you don't need me for any of it. I don't need anyone for it, but the right person could choose to be part of it." Kevin understood the distinction, and I could see him weighing his options. He could try to change, to become the kind of partner who celebrated my success instead of feeling threatened by it. Or he could admit that he was happier with a different kind of woman, someone whose dreams were smaller and whose success wouldn't challenge his sense of himself. "I think," he said slowly, "that I need some time to figure out who I am without being the person who takes care of you." It was the most mature thing Kevin had said in our entire conversation, and I felt a surge of something that might have been pride. "I think that's exactly what you need." We spent the next hour working out the practical details of our separation, with the kind of calm efficiency that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. Kevin would stay in the house temporarily while we figured out the legal and financial aspects of ending our marriage. I would move into a downtown apartment that would serve as both my residence and my business headquarters. As I packed a suitcase, with enough clothes and essentials to last the next few weeks, Kevin stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Amanda?" he said finally. "Yes?" "I'm sorry. Not just about the mall, but about all of it. About not seeing who you really were. About trying to keep you small. About wasting 3 years of your life." I stopped folding clothes and looked at him directly. "You didn't waste my life, Kevin. You gave me something I needed at the time, even if it wasn't what I needed permanently. And I gave you the same thing. We're just different people who wanted different lives. Will you be happy?" The question was simple, but answering it required me to envision a future I had barely allowed myself to imagine. A future where I woke up every morning excited about the work I was doing, where I surrounded myself with people who challenged and inspired me, where I didn't have to hide my ambitions or apologize for my success. Yes, I said. I think I will. B. Kevin nodded, and I could see him trying to imagine his own version of happiness. Maybe he would find someone who genuinely appreciated the quiet life he offered. Maybe he would discover ambitions of his own that he had suppressed to maintain our relationship. Maybe he would learn to be proud of himself without needing someone else to be smaller by comparison. I hope you will be too, I said. An hour later, I was standing in the driveway with my suitcase, waiting for James to arrive with the Rolls-Royce that would take me to my new life. The snow had stopped falling, and the stars were visible for the first time in days, sharp and bright against the clear winter sky. When the elegant silver car pulled up to the curb, Kevin was watching from the living room window. I could see his silhouette against the warm light of our former home, and I felt a moment of sadness for everything we had tried to be together, and everything we had never been able to become. James stepped out to take my suitcase, his professionalism unchanged, despite the unusual circumstances of this pickup. Good evening, Ms. Parker. I trust everything went well with your meetings today? Very well, thank you. And James? I think we're going to be working together quite a bit more in the coming months. I look forward to it, ma'am. As we drove, away from the house Kevin and I had shared, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The dizzy excitement of standing at the beginning of an adventure. Tomorrow, I would sign partnership agreements that would transform my business. Next week, I would be featured in a magazine as one of Portland's rising entrepreneurs. Next month, I would be planning events for clients who appreciated excellence and were willing to pay for it. But more than any of that, I would wake up every morning as myself, Amanda Parker, successful businesswoman, creative visionary, and finally free to become everything I had always been meant to be. The woman who had been abandoned at a shopping mall in a snowstorm was gone forever. In her place was someone stronger, more confident, and ready to take on the world. And as the Rolls-Royce carried me toward my new life, I couldn't help but smile at the thought that Kevin's cruelest lesson had turned out to be the greatest gift he could have given me. Sometimes the people who try to teach you your place in the world end up showing you exactly how much bigger you are than they ever imagined. And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. The snow might have stopped falling, but my new life was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.